Hey everybody, this is the chronology of the historical context of Karl Marx from 1873 to 1883, the last 10 years of Marx's life. This is from Marx Without Myth by Rubel and Manale. And here we go. The first section, Europe. 1873. After a brief economic upswing, business begins to fear overproduction. The panic develops into a general economic crisis in Europe, as before Europe's recession is preceded by a commercial slump in America. 1873. The Prussian Parliament passes the so-called May laws, requiring candidates for the priesthood to submit to state examinations and follow a prescribed course of study. Further, these laws, which form part of the Kulturkampf, also makes it easier for a person to leave the church and ease ecclesiastical punishment. Also 1873. The three emperors who met the preceding year in Berlin now conclude an alliance, the Dreikaiserbund, which I guess is the Three Kaiser League, in which they agree to isolate France from the European diplomatic consortium and to diminish rivalries between themselves for the sake of hegemony in the Balkan region. 1873 also. In face of widespread political dissension, the Spanish king abdicates and the republic is proclaimed. However, the prevailing chaos makes it impossible to constitute a government. Civil war ensues. Dictatorial powers are usurped by Emilio Castelar, while uprisings are instigated by Carlists, supporters of the pretender Don Carlos, and by the Alfonsists, partisans of his brother. 1874. The World Postal Union is established at an international conference held in Switzerland. 1874. At the Reichstag elections in Germany, 6 members of the SPD, Eisenach party, win seats in the parliament alongside 3 members of the Lassallean ADAV. 1874. Gladstone's Liberal ministry is defeated at the polls in England and Disraeli becomes the new Prime Minister. The same year he passes a measure of social legislation which limits the length of the working day. 1874. In Spain, Castelar resigns and is succeeded by Marshal Serrano, whose government proclaims Alfonso king. The country is not freed from Carlist harassment until 1876, when Don Carlos himself is expelled from the country. 1875. Disraeli passes a Public Health Act and an Artisans' Dwelling Act and repeals the 1871 Criminal Law Amendment which prohibited certain strike actions, i.e. picketing. 1875. At a congress in Gotha, Germany, the 2 rival working-class parties, the SDAP and the ADAV, unite to found the Sozialdemokratische Arbeiterpartei Deutschlands, Social Democratic Workers' Party of Germany. Their platform, the Gotha program, calls for government aid for projected production cooperatives and for free general education. It demands further that the working class be granted the right to form coalitions and that social and factory laws be passed. Russia signs a convention with Japan by which it acquires the island of Sakhalin, and Japan, the Kuril Islands. 1876. The first French Labor Congress is held in Paris. Present are representatives of the labor unions, cooperatives, and mutual aid societies. 1876. Plekhanov and others in St. Petersburg who support a revolutionary transformation of Russian society form a secret society which is later known as the, quote, Narodniki, or troglodytes, but later assumes the designation, quote, Land and Liberty. 1876. Bulgarian Christians in Herzegovina and Bosnia rebel against the treatment to which they are subjected by the Muslims and by the Porte. Serbia and Montenegro aid the insurgents, whereupon the Serbo-Turkish War is declared. England and Russia attempt to mediate and to effect reforms in the Turkish rule. 1877. The great powers signed the London Protocol against the protest of Turkey, who refuses to comply with the reforms it specifies. Russia declares war on Turkey and occupies Romania. Victories at Plevna, Shipka Pass, and Sofia strengthen Russia's foothold in Turkey, and the Tsar's troops gradually approach Constantinople. 1877. A religious issue provokes a government crisis in France under Prime Minister Macmahon. The dissident parliament is dissolved and new elections held. Although the Republican anti-clerical factions win a clear victory, Macmahon is unwilling to constitute a Republican cabinet and reestablishes the old monarchist one. Parliament refuses to acknowledge government legislation until Macmahon submits to their pressure. 1877. Sweeping changes are made by the administration, a striking success for the Republicans' man Leon Gambetta. 1877, the British Parliament proclaims Queen Victoria Empress of India. 1877, at the Reichstag elections, the Social Democratic Party wins 9% of the votes cast and 12 seats in Parliament. 1877, at Birmingham, England, Joseph Chamberlain organizes a new National Liberation Front based on the principles of democratic local organizations. 1878, with Constantinople endangered, Turkey decides to negotiate. At San Stefano, Russia thus lays down the following conditions for peace. 1. Montenegro, Serbia, and Romania are to become independent. 2. Bulgaria is to remain under the sovereignty of the Porte, but be granted a Christian prince. 3. Turkey is to institute religious reforms and pay an indemnity in money and land to Russia. However, these conditions arouse the displeasure of Austria and Britain, who feel threatened by the prospect of increased Russian power in the Balkans. Threatening the Tsar with war, Disraeli brings about his participation at a congress in Berlin, the objective of which is to modify the provisions of the San Stefano Peace. The territorial divisions of the latter are reduced, thereby restoring the European part of Turkey. Austria is given the protectorate over Herzegovina and Bosnia. Montenegro, Serbia, and Romania gain their independence, and political equality is proclaimed in all territories separated from Turkey as well as in Turkey itself. 1878. After 2 unsuccessful attempts on the life of the Prussian king, a law is passed forbidding both socialist organizations and newspapers and giving the government the authority to expel persons who represent a danger to the state. Despite the anti-socialist law, which is to be valid until the end of the 1870s, the Social Democrats win 9% of the Reichstag votes and 9 mandates. 1878. The student Bogol Yubov, who had been arrested for demonstrating with the Zemlya I Volya, refuses to salute the city prefect Trepov as the latter visits the St. Petersburg prison in July 1877. Bogol Yubov is beaten and removed to a foul and humid dungeon where he spends several weeks. In January 1878, to avenge this act, the young Farisa Sulich, at 27 she had already had 10 years of revolutionary experience, shoots and seriously wounds Trepov, letting herself be arrested immediately thereafter. At the trial held in April, she is acquitted by a sympathetic jury and flees the country to live in Geneva. 1879. Germany and Austria-Hungary sign a Vienna alliance, agreeing to support one another with all their military power in case of an attack by Russia. They also pledge benevolent neutrality in case of attack by any other state, unless Russia should support the aggressor. 1879. The resignation of MacMahon and his replacement by Jules Grevy marks the transition to a Republican presidency in France. 1879. The French Labour Party holds a second Congress at Marseille. Under the influence of Jules Gued, the delegates approve a program based on the principles of collectivist socialism. 1879. In London, a land league is founded to defend the economic interests of the Irish peasantry. Banned by the government in 1881, it continues to operate secretly until the late 1880s. 1879. The St. Petersburg Land and Liberty movement is succeeded by a new group called Narodnaya Volya, the will of the people. This secret society, too, tries to assassinate the Tsar, but the attempt misfires. 1880. Narodnaya Volya makes another attempt on the life of Alexander II, but the bomb which explodes in the dining room of the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg leaves him unscathed. 1880. The anti-socialist law in Germany is renewed for another 10 years. 1880. Gladstone is returned as Prime Minister of Britain, pledged to extend the county franchise. 1880. A new French ministry under Charles de Freycinet passes a series of anti-clerical measures directed in particular against the Jesuits who were expelled from the country. Public education is secularized, and participants in the 1871 Commune are finally granted political amnesty. 1881, Henry Hyndman establishes the Democratic Federation in England. 2 years later, in 1883, he will be joined by William Morris in reconstituting the organization as the Social Democratic Federation. 1881, again despite the anti-socialist law, the German Social Democrats win 6.1% of the votes and 12 seats in the Reichstag. 1881, France extends her colonial possessions with the occupation of Tunis. The Treaty of Bardo secures her protectorate over this territory, which has long been the object of rivalry with Italy because of the latter's commercial interests there. 1881, Russian emigrants in Switzerland, among them Vera Sasulich, Plekhanov, and Axelrod, form an organization of revolutionary propaganda. They are known under the name of their journal, Cherny Peredel, the Black Redistribution. 1881. In St. Petersburg, meanwhile, the terrorist group Narodnaya Volia assassinates Alexander II. Under the reign of his successor, his son Alexander III, the group is finally liquidated. In the east, the territorial expansion of Russia continues with the subjugation of Tekhe Turkmenen. 1881, with the participation of the new Tsar, the Drei Kaiserbund of 1873 is renewed in order to prevent France from establishing close diplomatic relations with Russia and thus threatening German and Austro-Hungarian security. 1882, a third partner, Italy, joins the 1879 alliance and is promised military aid if attacked by France. Italy fears disruption of her North African trade relations as a result of the Treaty of Bardo. 1882, Romania joins the Triple Alliance with Germany, Austria, and Italy. 1882, the Fabian Society is founded in England with a program of municipal socialism and state control of labor conditions. 1882, the German Parliament passes the first national laws for a system of general health insurance. 1882, the Russian immigrants in Geneva found the first Marxist party. Osvobozdenia, Truda, Liberation of Labor. New section, the Americas. 1874 to 76. After the death of the Mexican president Benito Juarez, a prolonged struggle for the succession ensues. Ultimately, Porfirio Diaz is elected president and restores order to the country until his death in 1911. 1877. Railroad workers organize a strike in the United States. 1882, the American Congress passes the first laws restricting immigration. 1883, North American telegraph operators and glass blowers conduct successful strikes. New section, Asia and Africa. 1877, Britain quells the resistance of South African colonialists and annexes the territory of the Transvaal Boers. 1878 to 1880, a third uprising of the Afghans against British occupation begins. Royal forces put down the revolt set up an Amir, Mohammedan chieftain who is favorably disposed towards the crown as against Russia. British troops are then withdrawn from the country. 1880, the Boers repudiate the British annexation of their land and war erupts in South Africa. British troops suffer an early reversal. 1881, France continues to extend its colonial empire by capturing the city of Hanoi and Tonkin. In 1884, war is declared between France and China. 1881, Gladstone negotiates peace with the Boer settlers, granting them independence within the British Empire, but reserving to Parliament the right to veto treaties which they conclude. 1882, at Alexandria, an Egyptian uprising against the presence of British, Greek, and Italian consuls occurs. The movement is answered by a British bombardment of the port and occupation of Suez. France is at the same time preoccupied by incidents elsewhere, and thus, by default, Egypt becomes a British protectorate. 1882, under the pretext of suffering from prejudicial trade laws passed by the government of Madagascar, France attempts to negotiate a new trade agreement. By 1883, failing to obtain the desired results, the French send troops to occupy Madagascar. New section, Scientific and Technological Progress. 1876, Alexander Graham Bell completes his work on the invention of the telephone. 1877, Nicholas August Otto introduces a silent internal combustion gas engine, the first four-stroke engine to use compression. 1877, the first refrigerated transport vehicles are put into use in the United States. 1877, Thomas Edison constructs the first phonograph. 1878, Edison creates the first incandescent electric lamp. 1880, Louis Pasteur isolates the germ of chicken cholera and prepares the first vaccination for fowls. 1880, the St. Gothard Tunnel between Switzerland and Italy is completed. In 1882, Marcel Duprez realizes the first long-distance conduction of electrical energy. New section, important books published. 1873, François Guizot, Histoire de la France, which is not read by Marx. 1873 to 1877, Leo Tolstoy, Anna Karenina, not read by Marx. 1874, Léon Warra, Éléments de économie politique pure, not read by Marx. 1874, Albert Effie Scheffler, Die Quintessenz des Sozialismus. Marx did read that. 1875, Sir Henry Sumner Maine, Lectures on the Early History of Institutions. Marx did read that. 1876, Peter Lavrov, The State Element in Future Society. Marx did read that. L.T. Townsend, The Chinese Problem. Marx read that. 1877, Lewis Henry Morgan, Ancient Societies or Researches in the Lines of Human Progress. Marx did read that. John Richard Green, History of the English People. 1879, Henry George, Progress and Poverty. 1879, Heinrich von Treitschke, Geschichte Deutschlands im 19. Jahrhundert. Marx did not read that. John Stuart Glennie, Europe and Asia. Marx did not read that. Jules Gued, Collectivisme et Révolution. Marx did read that. 1879, Maxim Kovalevsky, Rural Property. Marx did read that. 1882, Vivi Vorontsov, The Fate of Capitalism in Russia. Marx did read that. 1883 to 1885, Friedrich Nietzsche, Also sprach Zarathustra. Marx did not read that. He would have been dead. All right. Thanks for listening.